This is my desert island dish. So this is matar salan, so lamb and peas, just like Dad used to make it, but I think better. Sorry, Dad. I think it might be. So basically what I do is start with the lamb shoulder. There's my dog waiting for his snack. Whenever the lamb comes out, the dog comes into the kitchen. Oh, he's so fussy. Back to business. So what we want to do is just get a lamb shoulder. I keep all the fat on because I love it. So this is farmhouse lamb, which is local Margaret River lamb, and it's my favourite ever that I've used. It's so sweet, and like the umami in the fat is just super rich, and it's got great inherent flavour, which means that it's just naturally more delicious as an end result. So I have to try less, which is the point of good produce, really. So the sequence of this dish is browning the meat and then pressure cooking for an end result that's really, really soft. And I do have a super secret ingredient, and I actually think the super secret ingredient is what makes it better than what Dad used to do. And that's cooking or browning the meat, and also pressure cooking the meat with a little bit of whey. So the waste product from paneer, when I make paneer, I always reserve all of the whey, and then I use that whey back into my meat dishes and even to some of the vegetable dishes as like a stock. But unlike a stock, because whey is a milk product, it has a natural protein, so there's protein in there, has a natural acidity, and the protein sort of works and the acidity to tenderize the meat. And so the end result is just so melt in the mouth. I make shed loads of paneer now, basically, because I just want a constant source of whey. Okay, so once this is cut, so you can see basically it's just really roughly chopped into, Chip can have that too, into kind of 2-inch cubes. I want to keep the meat quite, I guess the piece is quite chunky because the browning process is protracted and the meat needs some kind of like larger form in order to retain its integrity through the whole process. So what I'm doing is just kind of compiling the base for the browning. So when I brown the meat, there's yogurt, there's mustard oil, which is over by the stove, a little bit of asafoetida, black cardamom, cinnamon, and a little bit of salt. See, my waitress skills are up to scratch. Look at that. Whoop. Here we go. Nearly. Asafoetida, which didn't break. So happy days. That's probably about 1/3 of a cup of mustard oil. I've cut 1 kilo of meat, and then I'm going to put in what you would amount to be 4 tablespoons of yogurt. And then I'm going to let this heat up. Now, can I just say a shout out to my eldest son, Kalen, who made this for me in engineering, and it is without doubt the best kitchen tool I've ever had in my life. The perfect weight, the perfect sharp, it's great for browning meat, so heavy, and look at the little snazzy handle. Thanks, Kalen, amazing. I'm gonna spice the fat and then put the meat into that fat. So seasoning all the way through all the time. So seasoning is typically when you're talking about salt. So a big heaped teaspoon of salt. I'm actually going to use, I'll use cinnamon, but you can see it's quite a big cinnamon quill in there, so lots of flavour. A few dried bay leaf. Use 3. A couple of cardamom pods. I don't have my cracker over here, so I'll just do it with my fingers. So you just want to open them up so you can see that inside. Use 2 of those. So we want this to get quite hot and for the yogurt to split. See how it's splitting in the oil? That's perfect. When the yogurt splits, what it's doing is essentially all the milk solids are coming away, and that's going to aid the caramelization process by crusting on the outside of the meat. And all that sweetness and caramelized dairy is really going to have an enormous impact on the end flavour profile. This all goes in. Onto the highest maximum heat. The reason we put yogurt in with the oil is the benefit of the yogurt is it softens the oil's heat. So without yogurt in there, essentially what you're doing is deep frying meat, and that results in a totally different texture. But as soon as you add oil into there, you're not deep frying the meat. The process changes to a more dispersed heat across the outer surface of the meat, and it results in a more tender end result, and that's why it's the dual fats. It's not just for richness, it's actually for the end result, the end feel and the mouth feel of the dish itself. Okay. Basically what I have to wait for is for the liquid component of this browning process to really reduce, essentially. But once it starts to reduce, we want to prolong the browning process, and the only way to do that is to add back more liquid, and that's where the whey comes in. Because water itself, by itself, won't give the same rich, creamy end result. So typically when you're dealing with Kashmiri dishes like a Rogan Josh or a salan chow, you will make a browning mixture that's water, yogurt, salt and a little bit of asafoetida, maybe with a little bit of chili. But to sort of further that tenderization process, instead of water and yogurt, I do whey and yogurt. So that's the whey that I was talking about from the paneer. A tablespoon of yogurt, salt to season, so like a half teaspoon. A little bit of chili, again, around a half a teaspoon, and that's for heat and to impart that heat into the base of the dish. A little bit of asafoetida, a couple of drops. Actually, there should be a little bit in here as well. Let me do that now. And then, as an extra structural component, a bit of fenugreek powder. About 1/3 of a teaspoon. There is a video on my channel on fenugreek and turmeric and the different ways that those bitter spices impart structure into the dish. So I'll put that description in the link. So you give that a mix, like a witch's brew again. I want the meat to be brown and to be starting to sort of really crust and caramelize on the outside before I add more liquid, because liquid inhibits the browning process. So it's like that very fine line of kind of always standing here and scraping the kadai to ensure that you're picking up the caramelized pieces off the bottom, that you're moving the meat around so it's being evenly browned, and so that you're actually at attention. So you can see and judge when a little bit more liquid needs to be added in order to stop the meat from hardening, but not so much that it loses that crispness and becomes, I guess, heavy with fat as opposed to delicious with caramelization. And it already smells incredible. It smells sweet and very that beautiful umami lamb fat smell, which is that very sort of sweet, meaty smell. This is why I literally always smell like a piece of boiling meat. Like, I can't get the smell out of my skin. I smell like a little meat dumpling. All right, so what you can see now is the oil's much more predominant, so the yogurt's kind of cooking out and cooking onto the outer of the meat, and you can see that with the meat. It's like it has that very soft surface area now where you can actually see the dairy on the outside. It's a little bit milky looking, very tender, but this oil, I have to keep moving it. It's starting to brown. And in another couple of minutes, it's going to be ready for a little bit more liquid in there to sort of brown and further caramelise and create more crust. Looks like a, like a kebab kind of a look. I don't want it to keep browning in that fashion. That's going to start to get tough, so there we go. So that just cools it down. Basically, what we're doing is we're browning, but we're browning in more dairy, more fat, a little bit of acidity, and a little bit of protein. And the lamb loves it. You can see how rich this has become again. And even at this point, to try, like it's totally delicious. It's so, like, you can't believe it's not a finished dish because that gravy is so savoury and it's got very elegant spicing already, and it feels complete, but we make it more complete, which is kind of the joy. But even at this point, it's totally edible. So yum. So when it's on this high of a heat with cast iron, which conducts heat really well, you can see in real time, it's only a couple of minutes before that added liquid starts to split and to evaporate. So it's not that long of a process. A little bit more. My wrist's getting sore. This is a great kitchen utensil, but it weighs a ton. It's like, all right, so just come close for a sec. So I'm not going to add any more whey after this. I just want to get it to the right consistency and transfer it to the pressure cooker. So I want you to know what that right consistency is. So too thin, too light. It needs a little bit more cooking down. So just come check, this is kind of perfect. You can see it's thickened up a little. It's only been a couple of minutes, but the colour's deepened and it's creamier. So I want to stop it because it starts to go too far and then the oil comes through and it gets thin. So that's getting turned off. And we're moving into step 2, which is basically transferring it to a pressure cooker. That's hot. But first I need to cook a few peas. And then come over to the bench top and I will show you the spicing. Essentially because I've put so much work into the base of that dish in terms of flavour, the next part of it is kind of like a toss together. So it's a little bit of a cheats way of doing it. If you can call standing at the stovetop for 30 minutes browning a cheats way of doing it, but you know what I mean. So a little bit more salt. So it's very seasoned, but I'm going to put into the pressure cooker some peas, some fresh tomato, some more whey, and maybe a fraction of sugo or passata. So it just needs a little bit of salt because the volume of produce going in there that's unsalted is increasing. So that's going to absorb the salt that's already in there, the sodium drive. So I need to make sure that I'm keeping the flavour up with the additions that I'm making. So a third of a teaspoon of fine pink salt. And now some heavier spicing. So ground fennel, I'm going to use 2 teaspoons. Half a teaspoon of turmeric powder. A heaped teaspoon of ground ginger. A little bit more chilli, but a Kashmiri chilli. So a good half teaspoon of a Kashmiri chilli powder. And then this is the bit that makes it, I think. So we're going to use a couple of different like earth spices. So lots of kind of interest in texture and grounding. These spices are really grounding for flavour. So 2 and a little bit of cumin seed, a teaspoon of fennel, a teaspoon of kalonji or nigella seed, and then a half a teaspoon of ground cumin. Yum, yum, yum. My piece. And then just in addition, a couple of fresh tomatoes. The fresh tomatoes, just chopped really simply like this, just give the dish a little bit of brightness and a natural sweetness. So there's quite a lot of sweet spice in there, so that fennel, ground fennel, fennel seed, Kashmiri chili becomes sweeter when fennel accompanies it, so there's a sweetness even through the chili. And then the natural sweetness of the lamb fat. And what you get is this very soft, warm, naturally sweet but meaty sweet dish as an end result. Oh my God, it's like heaven on a plate. I could eat that dish every day for the rest of my life and never ever get tired of it. That can stay. This comes away. There is no room in my fridge. So compilation. So it's just the transfer. Oh, I knew that would happen. Oh my God, I'm such a disaster. I'm a professional, trust me. But you want all of this. As much as you can. Then, like I said, you've done all the work. So now really what I'm just putting everything in. All of my beautiful spices that you saw me compile over on the bench, straight in. Little bit of just a basic sugo. I try not to be pedantic, but whenever I put sugo in, I have to put white pepper, salt and sugar because it like introduces the sugo into the Indian flavour because we're mixing Italian and Indian, so the sugo needs to get a bit of a accent. White pepper. And so honestly, it seems silly, but the smallest things can make a difference. So what I'm doing is just putting a pinch of white pepper, 2 pinches of white salt, and then like caster sugar, just like a little pinch. And that is going to introduce the sugo into the spice. So sugo is very flat and really, it dulls flavour, it dulls intricate flavour. So that's just going to kind of allow the sugo to brighten. And then my fresh tomato. But those little things are what make the difference. Okay. I'm going to put the rest of this browning liquid that I didn't use with a touch extra whey, so I know there's enough liquid in there for the pressure cooking process. You don't even have to stir it or anything, like it'll happen by itself. And then lid on. And it's probably going to need about 25 minutes. So this is the lamb and pea. So it's been cooking for around 35 minutes in the pressure cooker. First onto high heat until it whistled twice, and then down to a low simmer. So about sort of a medium low heat for around 20 minutes. I then let it rest until the steam popped by itself. So that process takes around 45 minutes from beginning to end until the pressure cooker releases its own steam till it cools down enough. That's a really elemental part of the process, because when you allow a pressure cooker to depressurize on its own, it exponentially increases the tenderness of the produce within, particularly when you're dealing with meats as well. It's really important. So you ready for the steam shot trap? Yum. Oh, what? So sexy. It's just so soft. The meat's like tender. Even the gravy, you can see the effect that the whey and the yogurt has. Like, it's so rich and buttery as a gravy. The lamb looks milky. Let me put it into a little pot. Okay. Oh my God, it smells like heaven. My dad, Anoop Gunju's lamb and peas with a bit of special Sarina sauce. My homage. That's right. Oh, you know, you do this with your fingers. I'm sorry, I can't use cutlery. Oh. It's so good. It's like lamby and tomatoey, and the peas taste more like peas, and tomatoes are sweet, and the gravy is so rich, but it's smooth. Like, all of the work that goes into that dish to make it feel like it's effortless is incredible, because it tastes effortless. You just want to keep eating it. It's really rich. You right there, Chip? It's super, super rich, perfect with dal and chapati and rice. Like, it's the most basic of tastes. It tastes just like what it felt like to grow up in my house. Just warm, comfy, delicious. Always smelled good. Always good food on the table. And just this really delicious underlying complexity. Simple flavor is like anything simple, you know, simple makeup, simple clothing. The more beautiful and elegant and refined, often it's the more structure that's gone in at the beginning in order to sort of execute that feeling of simplicity comes with a lot of technique, and this is well worth giving a go. It's so beautiful. Just, you need the whey. I'm going to make a video on how to make paneer, and I'm going to put that in the description for this so that you can actually have the whey and use it in the dish. If you can't get whey, if you don't want to make it, you don't have time, buttermilk is a good alternative replacement. But yeah, give it a go. It's magic. You've got to try that, Trav.